Well, I guess I'll go ahead and start then. Hanna and I work in an organization called the National Conflict Resolution Center. And Hanna works in our external relations department as a program manager. And she'll be talking about the different workshops we have available at the end. But I want to talk about something I have a lot of passion about and something I care deeply about, and that's called the bystander challenge. How do we step up as bystanders when we see inappropriate behavior in the workplace, not harassment, but the things that happen before harassment? So that's our journey for today. The National Conflict Resolution Center is based out of San Diego, California, and we've been in this realm of teaching about communication, conflict resolution, inclusive behavior, mediation, anything that's related to how we get along as humans, basically. We've been doing that for about 35 years, and I'm so old I can remember the beginning, so there you go. The bystander challenge is what we're going to focus on, and I'll give you some overview. Typically, it's a 3-hour workshop. We kind of do some customization as needed, but I'm pretty excited about this one. You'll see I have a lot of passion about it. And let me tell you the background of how we entered into the area of bystander action. The Navy came to us in 2014 and said, we want you to develop a training for sailors on how to react as a bystander when you see sexual assault as well as sexual harassment. Well, that was a little out of my realm, because I feel like there's certainly experts that really know about sexual assault and sexual harassment, but I really took it from a communication point of view. And as a coworker, as you think about the sailors, they have each other's back in battle. And so the relationship between them is very tight typically. So I took the attitude is many times some of them want to do the right thing, but they don't know how because of the other aspects of that relationship. And so I developed the training, and I had so many sailors tell me, this is the first time I felt respected. This is the first time I felt like what I thought and my values were important. Every other training I've gotten is telling me what I'm not supposed to do, which I already know. And so that gave me a lot of incentive to think about how can we use these same skills in workplaces, because we're not battle buddies, but we are in this workplace together, and how can we create a more supportive relationship. I did a lot of looking at different bystander trainings, and my challenge was most bystander trainings that I had seen assumes I'm good and the bad person is there. So I didn't care for that. I think if you're in a bar and someone's trying to, pick you up or doing something inappropriate, that's one thing. But when people are going to work every single day together, I think there's much more to it than that. That it's more complex than that, and relationships matter a little more than that. So in 2016, EEOC's Collect Task Force said that bystander training can help organizational culture. And so we really began to think, how can our organization provide the kind of training that people will not only be empowered to step up, but they can also maintain relationships when it's caught early. And that's what we focused on the last few years. So we've been developing it both live versions, we've been doing it virtually, of course, but all of our workshops are very interactive, and we also have an online version. What happened, Toyota, North America, Jane Howard Martin, she's I don't know exactly, VP in Labor and Relations. I'm not exactly sure of her title, but she saw our training and she said, we want that for every Toyota employee, because organizational culture is very important there. And so we've done some live. We've also developed a whole workshop for them. Yesterday, I was at a factory in Long Beach filming to show how bystander action can be in every work environment. Many times, harassment training and bystander training is really focused on the office environment. And it was very important to Jane Howard Martin that we respect the factory, the transport. And so we also developed that for them. So moving forward, we kind of began to think about, and I'm sure many of you know much more about this than me. This is not my area of expertise, but you know what harassment is. But what happens before harassment? And what we found by looking at research and reading was that many times there is a lot of behavior before harassment, especially hostile work environment, there's a lot of things that happen before harassment. And what happens is the person responsible, their behavior over time becomes more aggressive. And so we wanted to catch it early. Bystanders seeing microaggressions in the work environment, whether they're over the person's race, their gender, their ethnic background, all of these, their political beliefs, all of these things can make a difference in, if we catch it early, if we're hearing a microaggression, as a bystander, what can we do? How can we step up to that? Because then we're going to prevent the negative impact. So if you're not familiar with a microaggression, it's everyday slights, insults, negative verbal and nonverbal messages, whether intentional or not, that impede your ability to do well, work well. And so a microaggression will somehow place you outside, somehow doubt your credentials, somehow treat you disrespectfully. And so what happens is it's incivil behavior when we treat our coworkers with that kind of disrespect. And so incivility can lead, it's not a legal term, but it can lead to a sense of a hostile work environment. And as we looked at this is what we saw again and again. So before I move on, I want to see if anyone has any questions or thoughts thus far. You can put them in the chat box, or you can even talk, because we're a small group. Anybody have anything? All right, so just want to kind of put it in context. Traditionally, a traditional harassment prevention training focuses on two people, the harasser and the victim, teaches what is prohibited, conduct and how to report, and primary purpose is to bolster a company's defense. So me as an employee in this work environment, if that's what I'm given, then there's no sense of my responsibility, because every one of us has a responsibility to create a safe work environment, a psychologically safe work environment, in a sense, for the people around us. It also makes it so I'm less likely to do anything because I feel like it's HR's responsibility. It's not my responsibility. Now, bystander intervention training focuses on empowering good people. And I'd say most of us are good. Teaches everyone what to do in uncomfortable situation. And the primary purpose is to change that organizational climate. So kind of creating a space where people feel respected in the work environment for who they are, for their race, their ethnic background, their sexual orientation, whoever they are, and what they bring to the table, as well as their skill set. And so it's very empowering for employees to take place in this. All right, I'm watching you. I only see Gary, but I'm sure other people are there. So we thought about what is it around bystander values that are so important. Looked at someone from Columbia University, Zelinsky, who traveled the world looking at what is it that makes bystanders step up, sometimes in very difficult situations. And again, his research indicated it's the their moral beliefs that made them decide to step up. And so that really got my attention in thinking about creating a bystander training. So I'm going to ask you a question, and this time I'm going to ask that everyone puts in the chat box whatever they think, because there's not a wrong answer. So the first question, the first question is, what value is significant when we look at bystander action? So the question is, what value is significant when we look at bystander action? If people could please put into the chat box, when you think of the values a bystander has that would make them want to step up and take action, what would that value be? What value is significant? So if you could put in your chat box, whatever you think. Courage, respect, nice. Confidence, character, nice. Anybody else want to put something in? Their beliefs, all right. All right, good. So thank you for those that wrote things in there. And so that idea of tapping into your own values is really significant when we talk about bystander action. I've interviewed a lot of people who have been treated unfairly in the work environment. And I think of one that she hadn't been, but she had witnessed it before. She had seen it in the workplace and she had not stepped up. And she told me that her value that is really important to her was loyalty. So she saw stepping up and pointing out if someone had said something disrespectful, she felt that she was being disloyal by pointing it out to them that somehow she had ratted them out or whatever the case may be. And so when you think about that, that's true of a lot of people in the workplace. And so we have to recognize the fears that people have around doing that. And the loyalty can be loyal enough to help them see in a non-aggressive way when they've said or done something that's inappropriate. So the second question, Hannah, if you wouldn't mind writing it in the chat box, what is your greatest concern when speaking up as a bystander? And if you don't personally have a concern because of your job description, think about the concerns that people may have in a workplace when it comes to speaking up when they see inappropriate, disrespectful behavior. If you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat box. Thanks, Hannah, the question's there. Oh, retaliation. What the recipient of the behavior wants, okay. Anybody else want to put something in there? Reputation damage, a lack of strength of character. So these are some great answers. Fear, because you know probably better than anybody that retaliation is legally not acceptable. However, there's the natural fear. So when we're looking at a work group, if we don't take into account these fears as we work toward bystander action to make sure it's safe for people, they're not likely to do that. And so expectations going forward, lack of strength of character. So these questions are really important to try to work through, as especially in leadership. What are the fears and how do we create a space where the culture accepts and respects that bystander action is acceptable? Just because retaliation doesn't mean it isn't going to happen. Very good point. And I think we're all aware of situations where it may not be legally permissible, but the person has had a situation. So clearly we want to be really careful with that. The next question, what is the most important skill a bystander can have? So I've got all three questions up on the PowerPoint for your viewing. The last question, what is the most important skill a bystander can have? If you want to type what you think the answer is on that one. Courage, nice. Empathy, great. Any other ideas? What kind of skills are important? Oh, relationship with both parties. So thinking that the bystander might be like a mediator perhaps, or be able to talk to both people. Ability to compromise, conflict resolution skills, diplomacy. These are beautiful. And I think that we really focus on these three things. When we do our bystander training, we talk about the values and have people reflect on their own values, because we're not telling them what to value, but how do your values play a role of would motivate you to action. And we deal with the fears and concerns, because like I say, if we don't, I think we will be missing the boat, because we have to take those seriously and help people reconcile those fears and creating a space where it's safe. And the most important skill, well, most of the training is about skill building and reinforcing. So I really appreciate your thoughts about these, ability to compromise, the ability to have empathy, courage. All of these things are really important. So I do like to also point out there are some typical reactions that we see in the workplace, and I want to just spend a couple minutes on each of those. So your typical responses, One is to avoid, and that's probably the most common response from coworkers. And we want to help them feel empowered to do something rather than just avoid. And we'll talk about the 4 appropriate responses in just a few minutes. But avoiding, I think about when you avoid, it's one thing if you're on, the trolley or a bus or in public square. Maybe avoiding is a safety decision. Maybe that makes the most sense because you don't have any relationship. But when you think about avoiding, when it is your coworkers, there you have a responsibility, even if you're not a workplace leader. You have a responsibility because you were sensitive enough, empathetic enough, had enough compassion to see that something said that's been disrespectful. So to avoid it, you're really condoning the behavior. And so we like to think about what that means, because as a coworker, you have a responsibility. I think especially for allies, if you're an ally to a different group, whether they're LGBTQ or different ethnic backgrounds, and you want to be an ally in the workplace, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of examples. But as an ally, by avoiding, it makes it look like you agree with the person who's saying inappropriate things. Many times those things are couched as jokes. Many times they're couched as, oh, it's not a big deal. I didn't think about it. But the idea behind bystander action is to not attack your coworker, but respectfully let them know maybe they crossed the line, to help kind of reduce that kind of microaggression that happens in the workplace. Now, the second response, and this response fascinates me, and I think I'm most fascinated by it when a supervisor or manager does this. And I don't know if you've ever been in a workplace, but most workplaces I've heard of you hear this. Let's say it's someone that's disrespectful to their coworkers, but they're the best salesperson. And in that case, many times a supervisor will say, oh, just put up with her. She's our best salesperson. And that statement saying this person's sales skill is more important than your psychological safety is pretty, I would say, disrespectful to the work group. It creates an environment where people don't feel respected, and it's not a safe work environment. So accommodation is especially problematic when done by supervisors and managers, yet I've heard it many times. Avoiding is especially difficult when you think about a supervisor or manager doing that, because again, the message is this is acceptable behavior. And then the last one is attack. Now we're talking about in the workplace, and someone says an inappropriate joke. When the other person is attacked, the person is attacked for doing that, it can set up a dynamic where everyone's uncomfortable, that people feel like maybe they have to take sides. So usually attack comes out of a place of compassion and care for the person that's been the target of that joke, but it sometimes can be detrimental for the work group as well. And so those are the 3 typical responses we see in the work environment. And what our training does is to help people have more effective responses, whether it's within their own unit, or if there's bigger company kind of goals to do something. I remember I did this workshop for a local publishing company, and one guy came in and he was so unhappy to be here. He was so unhappy. He didn't want to take this training, another harassment training. But within 5 minutes, he bought into it and he became very excited about it. And he ended up telling me he really enjoyed it. And that afternoon, he went to a coworker who he'd been avoiding saying anything, and he was able to have a good conversation and talk about his concerns and do it with didn't hurt the relationship. And so how did he do that? We're going to talk now a little bit about the appropriate methods that we would say can really work in the work environment. So there's 2 interventions in the moment that we would recommend as coworkers have. And so one is distract. And distract is when someone says something that kind of changes the subject, so it distracts from the negative interaction. So a situation that I was recently told about, it was someone had a political bumper sticker on their car. And the other person, the coworker, was really angry about this political bumper sticker. And he was upset. He was yelling at his coworker. I can't believe you think like that. I thought I could trust you. What's wrong with you? And it was starting to be pretty tense because he was so incited by the bumper sticker and obvious political point of view difference. And the person distracted, she told me how she distracted was she said, oh, my bumper sticker is always an American flag. I'm really proud to be an American. You know, we can, and then someone else said something different. But the idea with distraction is changing the subject. It's very appropriate for some coworkers who maybe don't feel comfortable saying something in the moment themselves because of their personality. However, distraction, sometimes people have the skill set of just making a joke that's not related, but somehow makes it so it changes kind of the focus in that moment. Clearly, distraction is not a long-term solution, but it's a short-term solution. It's not expected that a supervisor or manager would use this approach because that, again, would seem like they're supporting in some way this kind of disrespectful talk. And so distraction for many people, especially people that feel shy about saying anything, is seen as a viable in the moment situation. Now, direct is interesting because direct is when someone says something in the moment that states kind of their value or what's important to them or how it's inappropriate, but they don't do it in an attack way. And they do it in a way that shows respect, but also kind of nips it in the bud. And the best example I have of that one was I was doing a lot of work for a corporation, and there was someone who had a PhD. He was very much a leader personality, and he told me this true story. He had, obviously worked very hard to get his degree, and he also worked very hard in this company, and he had been promoted to the executive team. And so he was pretty excited, it's a big deal, it's a big company. And then he went to the first meeting, and in the first meeting he went to, someone very high up, it was only about a dozen people in this meeting, made an LGBTQ joke. And he was kind of taken aback. What is that? Why did that happen? And so he thought, well, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. And then subsequently, every meeting he went to, something like that would happen by this leader in the organization. And he happened to be a gay man. And he also, he said he hadn't felt like that since middle school. Because he was new to the team, he didn't feel like he wanted to kind of make a big deal out of it. This often happens where someone who's newer is kind of the target. And so he was starting to dread them. He was starting to have anxiety. He was starting to feel, like not welcome. And so he was really at a loss because no one said anything. There was another new hire that came into the executive team. And the first meeting he went to, that happened again because it happened every meeting. And he said, whoa. He said, I know you're joking, but we're role models here, so we got to watch ourselves all the time. So, then he said, now let's go back to this, whatever the topic was. And so the person that told me that story said he doesn't know what else happened. All he knows was it never happened again. And so the idea of a direct approach is we have people actually practice that so that they can make a direct comment without feeling that they're attacking their coworker, but kind of stating what their values are or what their expectations are in a tone of voice and a way of doing it without the other person feeling personally attacked. So those are two in the moment strategies that we teach and we talk about, especially practicing direct. When we do workshops with supervisors, because they are expected to say something directly, we have them practice because it's not easy. It's not easy. That's the truth. If it was easy, people wouldn't avoid it, right? And so we give people a lot of feedback, and it's a good opportunity for them to learn together on how to make a direct statement that stays within the parameter of respectful behavior, but also kind of lets the team know that you're going to stand up for people being treated respectfully in your department. So 2 interventions after the fact. Certainly delegation is always an option. And so we talk about, one is delegation to HR. If you're concerned about something, that's the responsibility they have to be knowing that, or to your supervisor. The other thing that happens with delegation, the other thing that happens with delegation is that, let's say Gary and I both work with Shannon, and we notice that someone said something disrespectful to Shannon, right? I might say, hey, Shannon and I have been working on a lot of projects together. I'm just going to check in with her, how she's doing. And Gary, you know this other person, the person that said that to her, disrespectfful statement to her. Would you mind talking to her about that? So delegation can be 2 people who are both concerned about it, kind of trying to decide like who should be the person that talks to each of them, because the target of this unwanted behavior many times really needs to feel support, needs to feel like people care about them. And so delegating, depending on the relationship, can really matter. And always delegation to HR is appropriate, or to the supervisor, depending on the work environment. So delegation is something that we don't train people how to delegate, but we talk about the different elements of what does it mean to delegate. And then last, and this is what we spend the most time, how do we have a dialogue with both the person responsible and to the target? There's a question here. Do you delegate to talk to target first or no? I think each situation is a little bit different. And so that's how I would answer that. So to answer your question, Shannon, I think there's so many factors in these situations. If someone has been feeling disrespected, and maybe not the first time, and you're concerned, maybe other people had said things, and that conversation with the target is not to tell them what they should do. That's one of the things. I talked to so many targets, and so many targets said, people just want me to like take action, and I gotta think about what's the best thing for me right now. I'm not ready for that. I just need someone to listen, and I need to feel supported. Having interviewed targets, if you think you know what a target looks like, you're wrong. The reality is people can be targeted for any aspect of their identity. And so to have compassion and empathy for the different ways people show up at work and who they are and their different identities, and be in tune with how they might be perceiving. You don't have to tell them you should be so upset, but instead it's a question, how was that for you with the target? And so the dialogue with the target is one of really just kind of checking in and being supportive. But as you can imagine, many people are nervous about dialoguing with the person responsible. And so really a little bit of thought and planning. We spend a lot of time in our training talking about, how do you start that conversation? How do you say your concerns without attacking that person? How do you, get across those concerns? And how do you close it so that your working relationship is brought back together? Now, these are not harassers. These are not people that are clearly guilty of a hostile work environment. That's when it's gone too far, right? It's the time before, when people are getting comments to them that are disrespectful of their identity. And, I always think about, like, what would have happened if we would have caught some disrespectful behavior early on in some of the situations we find ourselves in now? What if that would have been stopped? What if that would have been not allowed to happen in the work environment? So I think a lot about that. And I think about, it doesn't start with harassment, unless it's like sexual harassment. That's possible, but I'm talking about hostile work environment. Typically, there's a lot that happens before then. And how we create the space where people can feel safe is really important. I'm going to show you a video for fun, and hopefully the audio works. We didn't have time because we got in the room so late. But this is a video that we did, and it happens to be You get to see distraction, you'll get to see delegation, being direct, and dialogue. And so this is a short video, but kind of show some of the skills that we're teaching. And it's just one example. You know, we've created others, but this one is one that happens to be about workplace. And let's see. I hope the video audio is working. I didn't be able to. There we go.
I landed the best job ever. I'm on this awesome team. Everyone gets along well. But there's this one guy that cracks me up. He's on the marketing team, and he's a really good graphic designer, but he's just so old school. Like, I think he'd prefer to draw everything out on pen and paper. He's so out of touch with technology. He reminds me of my grandpa. I call him Gramps. The other day, he was like, "What's Instagram?" And everyone laughed about it, except Cynthia. But whatever. Oh, this is going to be great for the Instagram story.
What's that?
Well, you don't have Instagram?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know what Instagram is.
That's too good.
Hey, raise your hand if you spend every waking moment worrying about your social media feed.
Hey, not everyone is obsessed with social media. At least John can go on a hike without his phone. Plus, John is the best graphic artist we have. Both Kurt and I think it's best that I talk to Adrian about how he's been treating John. It seems like everyone knows about what sexual harassment is, but what about how we treat generational differences? Adrian has made some comments to John that I think belittles him, especially around social media. I'm a little uncomfortable to talk to Adrian about this, but I know it's the right thing to do. Yeah, it looks like it's really coming together. I really like your idea on the last slide.
Cool, we'll start working on the details. I'll have John come up with an image for the slide. Should work pretty well. Then we can volley it over to your part of the team.
Wait a second. There's actually something else I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh, sure, what's up?
Well, actually, it's some stuff I noticed between you and John.
Me and John, what do you mean?
Like at the meeting the other day,
What about it?
about the Instagram story.
I just thought it was funny. I mean, he's so out of touch, he doesn't have Instagram.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I want to talk to you about. I know you may think you're joking, but one person's joke is another person's ouch. As in, that didn't feel too good, you know what I mean?
Well, everyone laughed, so most people must have gotten that I was joking, right?
Even if some people did laugh, doesn't make it okay.
Okay. Is that all?
Actually, no, I wanted to talk more about this. One thing that's important to me is that we treat everyone on the team with respect. I know I'm not your boss, but I wanted to give you this feedback as your coworker.
Geez, Cynthia, it feels like you're making a big deal about nothing. I don't think he cares when we joke. He's cool.
John doesn't need social media to do his job.
He just reminds me of my grandparents. You should have seen how hard it was for them to learn how to use Facebook. Some of the stuff my grandma writes on there are so funny. I post them onto Reddit. Have you heard of that subreddit, Old People Facebook?
Comparing your grandparents to your coworkers? Does that feel right, Adrian?
Well, I don't think it was that big of a deal. Just teasing him.
It crosses a line, and I don't want it to get worse.
Did he complain to you about it?
I haven't spoken to him at all, but I wanted to speak to you before it got to that point. Now, I have a question for you. How were you treated when you first started working here?
The team treated me really well. I felt so welcome. Still do.
That's good to hear. Did anyone in the company treat you differently because of your age?
Actually, yeah. I was in a meeting and we were brainstorming ideas and I made a suggestion. Someone laughed and said I didn't have enough experience in a patronizing tone. 10 minutes later, Akini made the same suggestion, just worded a bit different, and everyone went on about how brilliant he was. They couldn't hear my idea because of my age.
That's disappointing. When I first started working at the professional job, I looked so much younger than I was. And I became a target for people saying all these negative things about my age and ability, despite my skills. I saw that in you. And I always made sure I had your back because you have so much talent. Age shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I felt so respected by you. That made such a difference for me. I saw how you made everyone consider my ideas from the beginning. Now that's an automatic for the team.
Thanks for noticing. You completely deserve it. Just like John deserves respect on the other end of the work life.
I get it now. I never thought about it that way. Ageism is ageism, I guess.
Well, we both care about ageism because we experience it personally. No one should be ridiculed or unheard because of their age.
I get that completely, but sometimes I like to laugh. Can't joking be a part of our day too?
Of course, just as long as we're treating everyone with respect.
Okay, I hear you. At first I was feeling a little beat up about it, but then you helped me think about how annoyed I get when people treat me differently because of my age. That's when it really hit me.
Thanks for hearing me out. And I know this conversation was tough for both of us, but I respect you and I really want to continue working well with you.
All right. So there's an example of a workplace one, and we spend time, like I said, really focusing on how can you make a direct comment and how can you dialogue with both the person responsible and the target. So there is obviously a time to go to HR. We don't want to pretend that there isn't, there has to be. And so if it's anything over a microaggression or you're not sure, that's the most appropriate time to go to HR. If you are a manager, even if you can handle it, the company is now on notice, that should be documented with HR. If the conversation doesn't go well, despite best efforts, sometimes this happens, in which case hand it over to HR. And so thank you all for participating in this. Hanna, would you like to talk a little bit about the next step here?
Absolutely. Lisa, if you just want to put all three of those points up on the screen there. We just want to talk really quickly if your organization is ready for bystander training. So you're ready if your workforce has had harassment training fatigue and needs to hear this information in a fresh way. So if your organization is one that really equips your staff well, you're getting a lot of different training programs coming for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, maybe with all that information, all the rules and regulations. Hopefully you saw during our time today where we're giving you a little snapshot of what this workshop looks like, that it is run very differently than your typical anti-harassment workshop. We're talking about the root causes. We're talking about how we have an obligation to step in. It looks a little different than the do's and don'ts and the rules. It's really tapping into what our values look like and what kind of workplace culture we want to create. You can also hire us for bystander training if you want to supplement your current harassment training. Again, all of the practice that we do within our workshop is very useful. It's very hands-on. We walk around the room and coach people as they're there or pop into different breakout rooms on Zoom, and we're able to coach through the process. Oftentimes, there are a lot of questions around how should I phrase this? How can I approach this? And we give a lot of really tangible, practical steps for that. And with that practice time, it makes it just all the more confident when you're stepping into the moment when it's actually happening in person. And you can hire us for training if you don't already have a anti-harassment training. All of my contact info is here on the slide for you, and especially for those of you who are in California, and there is the SB 1343 requirement and the AB 1825 requirement for anti-harassment training. Our workshops are compliant with that, so we're able to host those virtually right now with the current shelter in place requirements. And we are also able, as Lisa mentioned, we have modules that we can offer for your learning management system. And we also do in-person training when that is available for us. And if you have any questions, you can contact me. And if you have any questions about anything that we've covered during this time, we can take those questions now.
Hi, could I ask a question?
Please do.
So I think I keep asking sort of, maybe it's the same thing I already asked, but you were saying that one should like go as a bystander, go and like bring the issue to HR. And I guess it's not that like, it's not that intuitive to me that one would complain sort of on behalf of somebody else without like I guess like first like at all, but also like without necessarily talking to the target first. I guess I would think like I don't know. I guess that like this was useful, but I would still probably hesitate to do that. I was wondering if you could just maybe motivate that a bit more.
So your question, Shannon, really has to do with like the timing of whether the person would talk to the target first instead of going to HR or talking to the person responsible that has done the behavior.
Yeah, it just seems a little bit odd to me to like do something on behalf of somebody else if you don't know like how they feel and if they are comfortable with that, and like just sort of like assuming that somebody has done something, like there's a victim and you go and complain and now they're in some of like maybe they don't really want that.
I see where your question's coming from. Sorry, I didn't understand it before. That's a really interesting question. Sometimes we have seen that, let's say two people have some similar aspect of their identity and they tease each other, the same race or the same sexual orientation, and they make jokes about that to each other. And they say things that otherwise would be inappropriate. And so, or maybe it doesn't bother the target at all, even if they aren't the same. So when a bystander is taking action, they're not representing the target. They're just saying, when I heard that joke, I felt uncomfortable. I'm not saying how it affected Hanna. Maybe Hanna didn't care at all. But when that kind of behavior or statement is made, it affects the whole team. If you're saying something that is a racist comment, and it doesn't bother the person whose race it happened to be one of the team members, that doesn't mean it's appropriate. I'm not, as a bystander, we're not saying you're protecting anybody. You're just saying, hey, when that happened, this is how I felt. I felt uncomfortable because it seemed to disrespect, whatever the identity is. And for me, I'm uncomfortable, even if both of you are comfortable with that kind of joking. To me, it's affecting our team and how we treat each other. So as a bystander, you're not protecting the target. Instead, you're stating how you were affected and how you would like the team to talk to each other. That's what I would say to that. And so thanks, she wrote, it makes sense. I think that was such a good question. I'm sorry I didn't capture it quite at first. I'm glad you pushed it a little bit and asked again. Because I've been in situations where the two people think it's funny to kind of tease each other about their race or their ethnic background or their, whatever part of their identity, their sexual orientation, whatever it is. And yet to me, it's like, no, you wouldn't want if I did that, right? And so we want to create a space where everyone feels safe and everyone feels like, even if that person's not in the room, like maybe somebody likes to make blonde jokes. There's not a blonde in the room. That doesn't make it okay. Gary, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
I just have a question about this team versus crafts. I'm one of those from the older generation, but where I came out of maintenance, and we had a shop, a lot of shop talk in that area, and then there was another group, the clerks. They sorted the mail, did things. I'm trying to think how to ask this question. How do you view the shop talk in maintenance, for example? There's a lot of it that goes on. Versus in connection with clerks, where they don't talk that much. They're on them. Their supervisors are on them constantly to work. But we worked at our own pace to make sure it got done right. But there's also some things that are inappropriate for verbalization. Would that fall into this somebody, a bystander from, say, a clerk coming over to a maintenance or to another craft and say, those kind of jokes or comments really bother me, and stop it?
Yeah, I think it can go in any direction because you in your career, you've seen where people from different departments are sometimes treating each other disrespectfully as well. And so that idea of being able to have that conversation, sometimes people say, why doesn't the target do it? And there's a lot of reasons the target doesn't do it. Many times they feel like, why do I always have to stand up for myself? Why can't someone else also see it's valuable that I am being disrespected? And, it gets tiresome to be the one educating people all the time and doing that. So bystanders do have a role in those situations as well. With the work we're doing with Toyota, we're really trying to go to, transport, to factory, to warehouse, because we want it to be their world and them feel like this is a training that can also apply to them in their craft or whatever their work they're doing. And so it can be certainly universal and help people really think about their role in any cross department or otherwise. What other questions do you have? Ooh. Hanna, do you want to add anything? We can make the PDF available, right, Hanna?
Yeah, so we are able to share a PDF of these slides that we shared with you today. And we're also, I mentioned in the chat box that we'll post the video for viewing again in that discussion portion for the meeting. So I'll be sure to post those resources for y'all. And I think in the short amount of time that we've had, hopefully you were able to see how interactive it is, but I just want to emphasize again that it's really empowering for people to be given tools and skills that help with their confidence in these situations. I think as we do these workshops and the feedback that we get from participants as they go through it is one that maybe they didn't think that they could step in, like there's a lot of hesitancy there, but once they talk about their values and are reminded of that, and then go through strategies around how to have these hard conversations, it really is empowering for people. And that's our goal, is to make sure that people feel empowered within their workspaces to create an environment that's cohesive for everyone. So that's the main goal with this workshop.
Yeah,
that's all I would add.
I've been thinking a lot about, how do you become an anti-racist organization? How do you make sure that your workplace is inclusive? And I think being able to empower bystanders so that those small comments, but meaningful, they're painful. I just think, what can we do so that everyone wants this to be a psychologically safe environment, whether it's in a factory, in a sales team, or any place, so that people can feel like they're really able to feel like they can focus on their work. I mean, the reality is that people are much more likely to work hard and be more productive if they feel valued for who they are and what they bring. And comments that undercut that, those slights, those disrespectful statements, sometimes in ignorance, right? Sometimes it's not that I'm trying to be disrespectful or harass anybody, but sometimes people are ignorant. And so helping to create that space is increase. I mean, it's always been important, obviously, to us, but I think it's increasingly important. So any other questions, or hope you've been enjoying the conference. I know it's a lot to do it virtually, but Hanna's information is on the screen, and we'll have that available in the discussion chat. Unless anyone has anything else, then we'll go ahead and end the meeting. Does that work? All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon, again, for your great question. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Laura.
Awesome. Everyone had great input.